Hey beer geeks, welcome to another beer log. Today we're going to do an episode because we think there's a lot of misinformation, or another word for that is a lot of marketing out there around the idea of mixed fermentation beers.
It's very trendy, isn't it? I mean, I certainly know that I need a little bit of schooling on it. The definitions I find a little bit wishy-washy.
Yeah, I mean there's just lots of different words that all mean subtly different things but are applied to things that don't necessarily go with that. So we're just going to go through all the different styles of mixed fermentation, what defines mixed fermentation, and ultimately what doesn't define a mixed fermentation beer. So we're going to start with what isn't mixed fermentation. How's that?
Is that everything in the world that isn't?
Well, yeah, everything that isn't one of the next three beers.
Things that sort of you might think are mixed fermentation.
Yeah. So this is a beer by North Brew Co. It's their triple fruited Gosa, which they do lots of editions of. This one has blueberry, apricot and blackberry in. Quite the fruit salad. So it's a sour beer. Right. So sourness literally just applies to the flavour. It doesn't really give away any more hints other than it's going to be tart on the palate. It's going to have a low acidity, and that's literally all sourness is.
I think a lot of people would just assume that is, well, they'd think like Brett or something, and they'd think it's got that kind of like funky farmhouse stuff going on.
So what's actually happening here has nothing to do with mixed fermentation. So the way that this beer has been made is they've brewed a normal beer. Yeah. They've then left it to cool down overnight or over a weekend, usually, where natural lactobacillus has got into it and lowered the pH.
Right.
So that produces lactic acid as it goes to town on the liquid and turns it sour. After that point, once the pH has been lowered to wherever they want it, it then is fermented like a normal beer.
Right, so that sourness is added at that point, and it doesn't get any more sour throughout. It's just that early point.
There's no mix going on during the fermentation.
Right.
They've soured a liquid, then they've fermented it.
But I mean, there's more control to it that way, isn't there? Because the brewer can know exactly what's happening.
Exactly, yeah. They can lower it to the pH they want. Yeah. Stop it, ferment it, because you kill the lactobacillus by boiling it. So it's really easy to just stop that process.
So you've got the sourness, kill it off, and then it's not going to develop anymore.
Yeah, and you get a very clean beer. So with everything else we're going to have, there's going to be lots of different things going on. With this beer, you want that lemony sourness to go with whatever you've done, like blueberry, apricot, blackberry, or whether it's a clean Berliner Weiss. So you just want something tart and lemony and refreshing at the end of it. You don't want all these other bugs doing different things. So yeah, don't think about it as a poor man's mixed firm. It's a totally different thing.
All right.
Okay, so next we're going to move on to what is sort of loosely termed wild ale.
Wild ale.
So this is beer that has perhaps started off as a fairly normal beer or a fairly normal recipe, but you've also inoculated it with something a little bit funky. 99 times out of 100, that's going to be Brett.
Everyone loves Brett the Hitman Hart.
Exactly. So this beer is it's another slightly more controlled way of adding an extra nuance to a beer, but you're still
you're aware, you know what's going in.
You know exactly what's going into it, and you know exactly what's going to happen to some extent.
But this is called a wild. This is a wild.
Or perhaps mixed firm. This is probably the one where it actually applies.
You would think with a name like that would be totally wild, like anything goes.
It is a wild yeast, but it's not been introduced in a wild way.
A wild setting.
Exactly.
Right.
So this beer is Irate Saison, which is a collab between Delacen from Belgium and Melissa Cole, the beer writer. So it's a bretted Saison. Originally, lots of Saisons would have been bretted. They would have actually been naturally bretted beers. Very kind of almost Lambic-y in their flavours. So you could tell it's a completely different sourness to what's going on here. I mean, it's not technically sour at all, because Brettanomyces is not a yeast that lowers the pH of beer. It's completely different to lactobacillus. What it does is it adds a bretty, funky
it's the farmyard
aroma.
Funk, isn't it? That farmyard funk kind of does sort of by default feel a bit sour, doesn't it? It has that slight yogurty sourness to it.
Yeah, but on the palate,
not there on the palate.
There's no low pH at all. It's still it's not sour at all. But it is hugely dry. So Brettanomyces, other than creating all these amazing funky flavours, what it also does is eat longer chain sugars that Saccharomyces can't. So a bretted beer is likely to be very, very dry because the Brett's gone to town on everything else sweet in that liquid.
Yeah, it'll just chomp through everything, won't it, if you give it time.
So this beer is made with Brettanomyces bruxellensis. So that's the famous Brettanomyces strain from Brussels. So he knows exactly what he's put in.
Yeah.
So it's a wild yeast. It's been taken from the wild and it's been tamed. Maybe it should be called a tamed ale.
Not wild, tamed. Like a broken horse, a broken stallion. So we've had a kettle tower. We've had a wild beer, which we think should be called tame beer. What's next on the scale?
So the next one up for me is farmhouse ale.
Right.
Traditional farmhouse brewing, the idea was that you'd use ingredients from your farm or from the surrounding area.
Yeah.
So that's where the term farmhouse kind of comes from. That's actually almost impossible to do these days, particularly given that hops and malt are grown all over the place. So it's rare to be able to have your hops and your malt and your yeast all from the same location.
Yeah.
But farmhouse techniques and farmhouse inspiration still happens today, and that's what we've got with this beer called Colonel Toby from Jester King. So this beer is using their house culture. So within that house culture there will be several forms of Saccharomyces, like normal brewer's yeast.
Yep.
There'll be several forms of Brettanomyces. There'll be several forms of Lactobacillus. And there'll probably be lots of other bugs like Pediococcus and all other weird kind of things. So they probably don't know 100% what's in that, but it's come from where they are.
It's their house strain.
Yeah, it's come from maybe trees, fruits, the walls of the brewery, barrels they've used. It's all stuff that's been produced where they are, either by them or by nature. So they don't say exactly what's in it, and they might not know exactly what's in it. They'd have to send it to a lab to find out. But they know that it came from where they are, and it's unique to them. That's the important thing about farmhouse brewing these days. It doesn't have to all come from where you are, but something in that, like the yeast or the hops or the malt, has to be uniquely yours.
It makes it yours, and it's like the terroir of where you are, kind of.
Exactly. It's where you start getting into terroir rather than
That's
taking something from elsewhere.
That's a terroir tongue twister. Very pleasant, I must say.
It's a lovely little lemony, but not very tart. Nice, robust, kind of grassy hoppiness.
Yeah, it's like a summer sort of fresh grass sort of thing going on, isn't
Exactly. It's something, it'd be brilliant with food. It's something that you just knock back at 3% over like a 5-course dinner and not really notice that you're drinking it, but just knowing it
You've
just
drunk 4
goes
of those.
with the beer.
You haven't fallen off your
I mean, given the prices for Jester King, you'd know that you'd had 4.
Yes.
But it is beautifully made beer and completely unique to them. So the pinnacle of mixed fermentation is the spontaneous ale. If it's coming out of the Seine Valley of Belgium, it's called Lambic. So this is beer that, much like in farmhouse, is all local.
Yes.
But instead of having a yeast, like a physical yeast that you put into your beer to start fermentation, this comes from the air.
Right, so this is what I think a lot of people would probably think of when they think of mixed ferm. It's that open to nature, anything can come in. People always joke about, I've got all bacteria in my beard, we can make a beer out of it and all that kind of stuff. That is literally kind of what it's about, isn't it? It's stuff floating around. It's on the walls, it's in the air.
Yeah, I mean, so these beers are made by cooling down the liquid overnight.
Yeah.
And it naturally getting infected with everything that's around. So you open, like it's in a swimming pool, usually at the top of a brewery, or in a room separate from the brewery, where just air is coming in. So it's like, if you left an apple out in a field, it would eventually ferment, or rot, as we'd call it. That's what's happening here. So it's naturally getting inoculated with these yeasts, and you're not allowing it to ferment in that area. You're going to put it into barrel or steel to ferment it, but it's naturally coming. There's no intervention in terms of getting that yeast in. So these beers are hugely complex, and unless you send it to a lab, again, hard to tell exactly what's gone into them. So again, what's really important, like with farmhouse beer, you have a uniqueness to the spontaneous beer. No one else could quite make it like you have, unless their brewery's like right next to you, but even then you'll, buy your malt from somewhere else, or you'll have brewed it on a different day, so there'll be a different kind of cocktail of bugs that have got into your beer and started fermenting it. So with these two final styles, you're getting truly unique beers. With these guys, you're using ingredients or processes that other people could,
Yes.
if they wanted to.
And do you think anyone can make one of these anywhere in the world? Or is there something magical about these regions where they're so dominant?
So you can't make lambic anywhere else, but you can make spontaneous beer pretty much anywhere in the world. I'm not sure it would be delicious.
No.
And you know, even then you could fix it through blending, which is a hugely important thing in spontaneous beer, to get the flavour profiles you want year after year with all these different variables. You blend it to get the palette you're looking for.
Yeah, so where you might, with a kettle sour, obviously you can totally control.
Yeah,
that.
there's no need for blending.
There's no need for blending, but that is a way of getting more control back into something like that.
And then, of course, there's the cuvée, which is where breweries have a couple of beers that they thought were sensational, and they go, well, what would happen if we blended these? What would these taste like? So they blend, say, they could blend, if they had a barrel left of this beer, not that it was made in barrel, but if it was, they could go, well, that might taste delicious with the hoppy saison or the Brett saison we made. So they blend those, and that's called a cuvée. But yeah, if you've got any questions about mixed ferm or spontaneous beers or kettle sours, just drop them in the comments box below. We'll do our best to answer them, and if we don't know, we'll get in contact with the breweries that might know to get your answers to you. But hopefully this has helped you work out the difference between a kettle sour, a wild ale, or mixed fermented beer, farmhouse ale, and spontaneous beer. Are you clear, Brad?
I'm way clearer than I was, that's for sure. I think it's an amazing field of beer, and I think it's only going to get bigger and bigger as people discover it and they go down that sort of sour path. And
in a crowded marketplace, a great way to go, this is who we are, is to literally use yourself, use your place.
Check out our recent Yonder video if you haven't.
Yeah, absolutely. Check out our Yonder video, that's coming up at the end, as is our beer school on how sour beer is made. Cheers.
Cheers.